welcome to the Yoga Therapy Institute, and welcome to our conversations. That's a simple title, the Yoga Therapy Institute's conversations that we're going to have on a regular basis. And with me, I have the lovely Yasmin Bedi.
Hello.
Hello, Yasmin, who is, she's one of our graduates, but she's a lot more than that. She's a C-IAYT certified yoga therapist, and you are also a medical doctor.
Yes.
And yes, and we will talk about your experience a little bit because it's very relevant to the conversations that we will be having today. And my name is Montserrat Mukherjee, and I am the director and founder of the Yoga Therapy Institute. I've been also certified by the IAYT, and I've been working as a yoga therapist now for 2 decades. So, Yasmin, welcome. Can you just tell us super quickly your experience? I believe that you have been working, right, with older populations. Yeah. Is that right?
Yes. So I work in the NHS. I'm a medical consultant specialising in older persons medicine, and I've been specialising in that field for just over a decade now. And after I qualified with my yoga therapy diploma, I've been doing some sessions in the acute hospital with that population of patient, just trying to keep them mobile, keep them moving, make things a little bit more enjoyable when they're stuck on an inpatient ward.
That's lovely. Thank you. Yes, I know. And I know that a lot of people who are listening and watching, that they've been also interested in your work and following you as you are trying to combine, yes, the medical system, your work in the NHS, and the principles and the practical aspects of yoga therapy and how yoga therapy can actually be used as a support tool for doctors such as you, medical professionals such as you. So wonderful work, Yasmin. So what we're going to talk about today, actually, well, we're in September, and September is Pink Month, and women's health is very important any month of the year, naturally. But I have a question for you because it's something that we've been discussing lately, and let's go straight to the point, which is, well, there's a lot of talk about the menopause lately, a lot of talk about women's health, a lot of talk about women's empowerment, and from all directions. And let me ask you a simple question, Yasmin. Do women actually live longer than men?
So from my experience of looking after people in the latter decades of life, I always find that there are more women than men under my care, and generally across our wards. And I think there are lots of studies to support that women do tend to live longer than men. And there's various reasons that have been put forward for that.
Yes. And of course, the question that we raise here is, well, yeah, I know that we hear about how terrible the menopause is. Actually, I don't share that view personally myself. My life I've been reborn in the menopause. However, we hear a lot about some really catastrophic stories about the menopause and how women live due to the female hormones in a terrible state, right? Apparently, we are sick all the time, we're ill all the time, and the quality of our life, it doesn't seem to be so good, even though we live longer. Yeah, we're like that turtle and the hare. But we seem to suffer a little bit more through life. Is that your experience as a medical doctor?
I would say that because the people that are coming in to the hospital under my care who tend to be females, we do tend to find that people will come in fairly frequently in the later stages of life. Women do tend to have more issues with bone health, but it's not unseen with men, and falls and things like that is seen both across men and women, but certainly because we tend to see more females, we see it more often. However, there's a group of women who age very well, who are mobile right up until the the very last few years of life and seem to have no problems. And if you ask them how their menopause was, there was no problem. So
They can't remember. They can't remember.
because it was so long ago.
I've got members in my family that you says, "How was your menopause?" I go, "Oh, well, I just went through it. I just I didn't have any symptoms." And I guess that maybe if they had those symptoms, they forgot about them.
Yeah.
So so this is important. Why? Because there was a recent, quite a very well-known scientist, Dr. Amen, who said quite clearly in several channels of social media, and he's very respected around the world for brain health. He said the menopause is a drop in hormones, and that drop in hormones, the reason for it is because the planet is trying to kill us. It was a very clear statement. The planet is trying to kill us, and that's why the hormones are dropping. And he said, I'm not okay with that. And hey, I've got the solution for it, which of course is going to cost you money. So lots of women signed up for it. Is the planet trying to kill us, Yasmin? What do you think? Is that the reason why our hormones drop? What is your perspective of why the hormones are dropping?
Well, I don't think the planet is trying to kill us. We've been around for tens of thousands of years, and it's a natural part. It's how we've evolved. Women have a narrow sort of childbearing window as opposed to men who can continue throughout their life. And, becoming pregnant, carrying a baby, giving birth, it's a lot of pressure on a woman's body. And actually, it takes a lot of energy and reserve to create babies. And so when we come to the end of our childbearing years with the drop in hormones, it's often a time where women can then change their focus and change their attitudes to life and undergo a wonderful transition into supporting the younger generations or working on their career. I absolutely don't see it as the planet trying to kill women.
No.
Because women have lived beyond the menopause for many, many years.
Well, the longest living person on this planet was a woman. She was French, actually. She lived to 124 or something like that. So yeah, and she lived a really stress-free life, and she did have one child. So there's no doubt about it that childbearing and having a baby and giving life and etc. carries a risk. So therefore, in a way, that drop in hormones is not the planet trying to kill us, but actually trying to protect us.
Yes.
So that we don't have children at an older age where the body cannot handle it. And not only the body, as you know, but also mentally as well and emotionally. It's hard to handle, right? Baby. I mean, you don't have to have children to know that because you've been a child. Yes. So you've been a baby and a child yourself. You've been a teenager. So therefore, anybody who's been a teenager, they know what that pressure involves for somebody's mental health, who's taking care of us and living with us. So there's no doubt about it. So let me ask you something. If the planet is not trying to kill us, however, we do have a saying in Spain, I wanted to share with you, and I shared it earlier, which is mujer enferma, mujer eterna. What does that mean? It means a woman who is ill all the time lives forever. So we have this image. I grew up with a wide bunch of women who, some of them became centenarians, and they were always complaining, complaining, oh, this is hurting, oh, my bones, oh, my back, oh, my this, oh, my that. But they buried us all. Yes, so they stayed there forever. Is this really necessary? And what do you think nowadays? What is it that we can do to take care of our health better, considering that our lifestyle is not the same as our grandmothers and great-grandmothers, right? Yasmin?
Yeah.
Great-grandmother, was she out in a bar drinking and smoking, right?
Absolutely not.
Not exactly. My great-grandmother, who lived to nearly 100, also not. Did they open a bottle of wine or did they drink high-sugar cocktails regularly? No, at the most I would have a little sweet wine, on a special occasion.
Sherry.
The sherry,
Yeah.
exactly. And right, okay. So champagne now has become like, open a bottle of champagne for every occasion, and smoking as well. Yes, although women did start smoking like men, but decades ago it was not the case. It was very rare that women would be smoking. So on top of that, we have full-time jobs, high levels of stress. We're expected to make our own living as well as everything else. So there is no doubt about it that our lifestyle may be making that menopause, that drop of hormones, more challenging.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Our lives now are almost uncomparable to that of our grandparents, great-grandparents. It's just a different world.
It's a different world. It's a different world. And we are really, really expected to have those high levels of standards. As we said earlier, that we were having a conversation before we started, saying, if you don't have a cleaner now, you're a loser. Yeah. Or you're considered to be a poor person. And it's like, well, no, I don't have a cleaner because I want to clean my own house and I want to move and exercise and do it myself. So when you look at the blue zones, for example, and I was watching this wonderful documentary about the blue zones, so you saw this woman in Costa Rica, and it was saying, oh my God, she's like in her 90s and she's chopping wood and she doesn't have problems with her bones. But she doesn't have problems with her bones because she is exercising, right? She's chopping wood at the age of 90, right? Okay. Now, if you're going to get a cleaner, you're not even cleaning your stove, then what do you expect? Right. Okay. So I'm not suggesting that people should go out there and chop wood. And I am very aware of the circumstances that people live in Costa Rica are below desirable for a lot of people. I really realize that we're looking at it from a privileged perspective. However, it is true that we do less and less. And then we'll go and do yoga, to the studio. And then we think, oh, wow, why are my joints hurting? So can we look at this case, Yasmin?
Yeah.
Because we're looking at women nowadays, and about this student, it's a student from the school who she's nearly in her 60s, and she contacted me extremely upset because she has been diagnosed with a really, really severe level of osteoporosis. So her bones are disintegrating. And she was really upset. She was in tears, in fact. And she said to me, how can this be? She said, I have done yoga my whole life. And I've been vegan my whole life. And she lives in Ireland, yes, which I think that's a very important factor as well to consider what's going on with this person. So this female client, this female student, has severe osteoporosis, and she says, well, I've done yoga my whole life and I've been vegan my whole life. How is it possible? So tell me, Yasmin, from your perspective, your knowledge about sarcopenia, taking care of older populations, and as an MD, what do you think of this?
So I suppose the first thing that jumps out for me is where she's located. So Northern Europe, short, winter goes on forever. Outdoors less contact with the sun. There's more and more advice now about covering up from the sun because of skin cancers, particularly if you're Caucasian. So, and we know that exposure to sun is so important for conversion of vitamin D so that we can have nice, strong, healthy bones. So that's sort of the number one thing. And actually, that's a huge thing across Northern Europe. And there are guidelines now that say for certain populations, particularly in winter, everyone should be having vitamin D replacement. It's not mandatory. So whether people are having that or not will depend on whether they've seen their doctor or if they just follow the general advice. Then we have someone who has done many years of yoga with no other forms of exercise.
She walks the dogs.
Okay.
She walks the dogs. Yeah.
So a little bit of aerobic exercise. So Yoga, the focus is often, there's so many types of yoga now, but with that focus tends to be on flexibility and lengthening.
She practices that type of yoga, the flexibility, the flexible yoga, the one about being very flexible. And she's quite hypermobile, in fact. Yeah.
Yes. So being hypermobile, we got the pressure on the joints. And then with that stretch, that flexibility, we're almost bypassing the function of our muscles, which are to protect us from certain movements. And when you've done yoga for years and years and years, you can completely disengage your muscles and become super, super flexible. And actually, that will lead to damage to muscles years down the line that you don't expect. And I think that's one of the things that isn't talked about enough in the yoga community. There's a few people that talk about their joint replacements through that, but actually the muscle effects. But of course, if you're not doing exercises that are weight bearing and sort of using good muscle strength, then you're not helping to build up your bone, because your bone is a dynamic substance. It's not just set in stone. It doesn't stay the same throughout its whole life. It's sort of an endocrine thing. There's a constant turnover of bones where you're building up and you're breaking down, and that balance is what will define whether your bone is strong or thin. And there's so many factors. People become osteoporotic through primary factors. So that could be someone with medical conditions where they're not absorbing. But then you have the secondary osteoporosis, which is what it sounds like we're seeing here, where it's a side effect of, it's more of a lifestyle thing. And the most important thing, I think, for women to be thinking about is the weight bearing and resistance exercise through all of our bones, all of our muscle groups. One of the things that I've been reading about is something called sarcospine, which is sarcopenia. So sarcopenia is age-related muscle wasting, which is really important when we're thinking about thinning of the bones, because bones and muscles are so closely aligned. But the wasting of the extensor spinal muscles happens at a much greater rate than the limbs, and you can only diagnose it through certain scans. And so if you've got a thinning of the spine, you're likely to have weakening of your back muscles as well, which, if you're only working on flexibility, you're not building up the strength in your back and your core and your posture. So
wow. Yeah, absolutely. When I look at her, she is very, very slim, very, very, very thin, quite thin, and fragile looking. Yes, fragile looking. I wouldn't say that there's muscle tone at all in this person, not really. So yeah, that would make sense. And I've seen it, and it's something that I've observed also in my work as a yoga therapist, working with hundreds of women.
Yeah.
In that case, yes, it kind of corroborates what you're saying, that I get so many students and clients who practice yoga and they do a lot of the flexibility work, and they experience that lack of strength, of tonicity, and therefore start to experience joint pain at a very early age. And I think that you mentioned earlier, Yasmin, about a study where you saw women already in their 30s, that if they have knee pain, that is kind of like a sign, that something is going to not be so quite right for them as they get older.
Yeah. So this study really jumped out at me. So this was published in 2021, and it's called Knee Pain in Young Adult Women Associations with Muscle Strength, Body Composition and Physical Activity. And basically, so they got two groups of women who were 25 and compared the two groups based on sort of their activity and whether they have knee pain or not. They then, 10 years down the line, followed them up for the knee pain, but also then compared their DEXA scans to their bone strength. They did some muscle strength assessments, and they basically found that lower thigh muscle strength in the mid-20s was not so low muscle strength was not associated with future knee pain, but people with knee pain tended to have lower thigh muscle strength and a body composition with more fat and a lower lean mass, thereby suggesting that if you've got knee pain, you're at risk of developing weight gain, low muscle mass, and eventually the development of the muscle wasting, the muscle aging. And they thought that perhaps this, as early as your mid-20s and early 30s can potentially tell you how your aging is going to be like, and potentially your longevity as well.
One thing that I've noticed, Yasmin, is that, and I've been noticing this for decades, that there are more and more young women that I've been working with that they already have knee pain. Like, I used to think of knee pain like something that my grandmother had. So I would go and see my grandmother, how are you? And she'd go, oh, my knees, she would say that. Okay. But I started to see more and more young people, and also at the school, we have hundreds and hundreds of students who already have knee pain in their 20s and in the early 30s. Now, that is a red flag, right? That is a sign that something is not quite right with the joints, that maybe the practices that you're doing may be causing some wear and tear already in your joints, and that there's not enough engaging of the muscles. Like, now we started to realize those hypermobilizing of some of the yoga practices, we call them asanas, how they really and truly may be a sign, as you said, that they're bypassing the engagement of the muscles. I like that, what you said. So I just bypass it. I don't need to engage the muscles. And I just, hang on my joints. And you really, in downward dog.
Yeah. And the cues that we're given, most of the cues I got given when I first started, there wasn't much focus on muscle engagement. It was all about lengthening and, your positioning, your alignment, but not about engage your...
No, and as a matter of fact, many of us have been given the cue of disengage, in fact. So, for example, Cobra, if you're Cobra, disengage the glutes. Yeah, and what happens then? You disengage the glutes, you have no support to stop your spine from going back. And so therefore, you're going to be hanging on that joint of the sacrum. Yeah, the sacrum, the L5S1 area. So yeah, definitely. This is, and these are perhaps some ideas that we have that we are mistaken about. Yeah, so yes. Do yoga, yes, and practice your yoga in the way that we said, that is to become more flexible. And then the other factor as well that maybe increase our risk without us realizing is being a fully plant-based, following a fully plant-based diet. Where is the risk there? Why could it be a risk for aging and for osteoporosis?
So it's very interesting, isn't it? Because plant-based diets have been fashionable, and then they've sort of been brought into the scientific community as these diets that are going to cure us from so many lifestyle conditions. And I'm vegan and have been for a long time, so I'm super aware of all these different effects if we're not having a balanced diet. But one of the biggest things when you're on a plant-based diet is it's really easy not to get enough of your minerals, your vitamins and minerals. Vitamin D is a huge one. There are many people that are on a strict vegan diet and they're perhaps not checking their vitamins and minerals regularly, not taking supplementation. So that's a big one. And if you're having bone thinning, then your vitamin D and calcium is super important. And it can easily be checked nowadays. Most of the time, the GP can check it, or you can get a private blood test that isn't too expensive. And then obviously with a plant-based diet, you're missing out perhaps on some of the proteins that are found in meats or in the dairy, eggs and things. So your amino acids, which build up the muscles. And there's there's so much, if you go onto social media, there's so many people saying this and this, and at times it's conflicting. It's really difficult to find really good advice. But
Yes.
certainly, I think finding a reputable resource and doing your own research is super, super important, and making sure that a plant-based diet is really balanced. None of this ready meals, none of this fake meat. That's just junk. Proper food with a colourful plate with lots of different food groups, and really thinking about your protein, where you're getting your pulses, your legumes, tofu, your soy, and maybe even if you need some supplementation with reputable plant-based protein replacements, is also something to consider for your muscle and for the whole body.
Yes.
And then, of course, she's in almost 60, so then we've got the menopause, perimenopause thrown into that mix as well, which will have an effect on her bone health, simply because you've got that decline in your female hormones. And there is, again, there isn't any clear evidence, but there's certainly correlation that as women hit the menopause and there's a decline in hormones, it does lead to a drop in bone strength, and all of those factors that can lead to weakening of the bones. And
well, again, for what I know, I know, well, because I experienced it myself as well, and I see it, something happens to the tonicity of everything. Everything starts to go south. How is that possible? So they tell me it's because of that drop of female hormones. So that affects also the muscles. And I've noticed, because having been quite, having done quite high impact sport my whole life, I played water polo, I was a swimmer for a long time, and always on the go. But I did notice, as a matter of fact, that before my menopause, I could build up muscle like this, because my muscle memory is incredible because of all the sports I've done my whole life. But I've noticed how after the menopause and after not having had a menstruation for a year, it's a little bit harder to build up muscle. You need that little bit of an extra effort. Right? And I think, with the face, nothing you can do. Exercise the face. That's why there's face yoga, right? As well. Like,
yeah.
all those exercises.
And those things where you can smooth your face down.
Yes, exactly. So maybe face yoga is the next thing to do as well. Definitely. And but I have noticed that definitely the building up of the muscle tonicity is a bit harder work. And I can imagine as we get older, let's face it, Yasmin, we do become more tired, right?
Yeah.
So having to go to the gym, having to do that exercise all the time. And sometimes I find that yoga is the easy way. That's what I find. I've got my mat. I go, I'll just do a little bit of stretching, meditation, breathing onto it. This feels so nice. It feels like a little massage to the body, but it's not a workout, right? In many cases, I find, for me, especially having done yoga for so many years, that for me, the practice of yoga is, as you said, I've been stretching my whole life. I've been doing this my whole life. It gets to a point where I can do it fairly easily and I don't have to engage the muscles. Engaging the muscles is a lot harder work. And so definitely I would propose adapting yoga to women's health. And I know that this is a big subject, right, Yasmin, because the yoga that we know now, the physical yoga that we know now, there's several lineages that, of course, we can go on to. But in reality, when we look backwards, it was created and it was developed for young Indian men.
Yeah.
Right? We're not going to go into that subject, but it was developed. And when you look at the pictures of Krishnamacharya and his followers, and then also when we go into the Bihar school of yoga and Kundalini, that was created also for the soldiers, the Sikh soldiers. It was for young Indian men.
Indian men,
So, right. So,
huge differences between the way the young Indian men were living compared to British,
Or
before you've even taken anything else into account.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And for them, there was no muscle problem, right?
No.
There was no problem with the muscle. But then development of the yoga practices, and then we find that the majority of the practitioners are women. And a lot of them Western women, which there's nothing wrong with that. We'll go on to that subject another time, but nothing wrong with Western women doing yoga. Everybody's like, oh, why Caucasian women should not be doing yoga. It's like, why not? Yeah, but anyway, okay. So, but the bodies, our hormones and our muscle tone is completely different. And we would benefit more from doing a kind of yoga where we engage the muscles more consciously, right?
Yes.
So less pulling of the joints and more engaging of the muscles to protect those joints and to protect our bones. Because I just want to recap a little bit very quickly. You talked about how the bones are dynamic, and there is a process called remodeling of the bones. Is that correct? And when we do, just for those who are listening and they don't know much about it or they're a bit confused, correct me if I'm wrong, but whenever there's resistance, onto those bones, the bone as a reaction remodels and grows. It kind of there's a growth factor in it. So that the more resistance we put onto that bone structure, the more remodeling is going to happen, and therefore that bone is going to thin less. Yes. So that is. So looking at that, we look at anatomy and then we look at what we're doing. And I think to myself, well, according to my anatomy lesson, women should do more resistance yoga, resistance type of yoga, where we're going to be maybe balancing more, engaging those muscles more, strengthening rather than collapsing or hanging on our joints and doing this hypermobility and hyperflexibility.
Yeah. And doing things that are functional. So almost recreating what our ancestors would have been doing in terms of bending down, lifting things above our head, sort of, functional movements.
Functional movements.
And there are plenty of those in the asana,
Absolutely. There could be, we can think of chair pose, right? Okay. We could think the majority of the standing poses, definitely some planks, side planks. Right. Okay. So all of those, and making sure that we're engaging really well the muscles rather than hanging there. Yeah. Because sometimes I've seen, and it takes training, because I've seen people doing chaturangas. Oh my God. I go, okay, they literally just drop on the shoulders and hanging there rather than really engaging the muscles. And it's hard to do when your whole life you've been doing it, right, hanging on the joints, but to pay a little bit more attention to that and to adapt yoga to women's health. And it's interesting because a lot of the times when we think adapt yoga to women's health, we think of, okay, do some wider hip openers, but actually that's not the case. Yeah. Adapting yoga to women's health is actually containing and engaging the muscles.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, in that way, what about cardiovascular exercise for women? So we have the strengthening, right? We have the engaging of the muscles. I read a study which was about women's cardiovascular health and said that actually moderation is key. Rather than doing these high impact, and how, as we go in the menopause, this is more important even because our cardiovascular health is affected by the drop of the estrogen. Is that correct? Of the hemoglobin?
Yes, absolutely. And that is one of the risk factors when you're postmenopausal for developing ischemic heart disease or something like that. But aerobic exercise is vital. If you want a well-rounded, healthy, functional body, you need strong bones and muscles, and then you need your pumping, so your heart, to be able to circulate blood and nutrients and oxygen to your body when it's under pressure. And for those people so the high intensity, where you're doing something really quickly and fast, and then you pause, and then you do something else. I mean, that obviously will put pressure on joints, particularly if it's so quick that you're not able to do things in a controlled manner. So you're just throwing an arm or a leg around and you're not engaging properly. There's always that risk of injury to joints. But also it's good for our cardiovascular system, but I think it does put a lot of pressure on a body, particularly if you are going through sort of the perimenopause or the menopause, because when you're doing high intensity, you may be triggering your stress response. And so that causes a whole cascade of hormonal effects that perhaps we don't want. And then in terms of endurance aerobics, so there are, long distance runners and things, we do know that they will have a lower muscle mass. And that's, so if you're a woman that does endurance for your whole life, then potentially when you're coming to perimenopause, menopause, and that's all you do and you don't do muscle training, then you will have a lower muscle mass and then you're going to go through that cascade. So yeah, definitely cardiovascular is important, but I think there's something about getting that balance.
Yes, absolutely. There are some good studies also on high intensity interval training. Seems to be beneficial for women who are recovering from breast cancer, reduce the chances of cancer coming back when it's done 45 minutes, 3 times a week. But of course, we have to consider as well what has been your cardiovascular health throughout your life. And if you're overweight or not overweight, if you've been a drinker and a smoker and you're overweight and then all of a sudden start high intensity interval training, there's a good chance you could have a cardiovascular event. And as we said, the female hormones are a cardiovascular protector, estrogen in particular. And so therefore, when it drops, that to begin with that moderate exercise, and what would moderate exercise be? Because a lot of people say, oh, well, what would moderate exercise be? I go to the grocery store and I do my shopping. That's enough.
So sort of the UK and sort of the general guidance around the world, particularly with regard to the lifestyle medicine, is 150 minutes of movement, physical activity a week, or 75 minutes of vigorous. And moderate is when you can sort of maintain a conversation, and vigorous would be when you're completely out of breath. But again, I would say 150 minutes is much better for the body physically than 75 minutes of really going all out. But there are people that will say, do it in 75 minutes, then you don't need to do anything else for the week. But also, it's important to say that those minutes don't include your flexibility, because that is still important, and your strengthening work that is on top of that.
Yes. So to be able to balance it all, and to try perhaps not to be sedentary for the whole day, but okay, maybe work a little bit on your strength 3 times a week, work on your cardiovascular, maybe walk every day, right? Sometimes getting a little bit out of breath, sometimes that you're walking with a friend and you can talk. And of course, still, we're not saying that being flexible is not important. However, what is really interesting, Yasmin, in that famous study that there was where they checked they checked strength, cardiovascular, and flexibility. Both strength came out on top as showing that the best health markers. The second one was cardiovascular, and flexibility had no effect whatsoever. So, right, okay, as a yoga teacher, I go, I'm going to ignore that. So, yeah, but what I want to share with you, Yasmin, was that, yes, I do my strength training. In fact, I just came back from that 3 times a week, sometimes twice a week. I don't need to do 3 times a week. And I'm active. I don't have a cleaner. So I keep my own house. And but now my forward bends, or, when I go to touch my toes, I notice my hamstrings nicely stopping me going all the way and putting my head between my legs. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I thank my hamstrings and I said, oh, thank you, hamstrings. You're tight. You're holding me back, making sure that I'm not going to over or hyper mobilize. Yeah. So it's a different perspective. And to live life in that sense as much in balance as possible. I am concerned about some forms of yoga that have come out lately that are very new, which is like yin yoga, which is doing that, right? Okay, where there are these stretches, holding that pose for many, many minutes. And I hear some information such as sit on the joints, or when you stretch the joints, you release tension of the joints. I'm like going,
I've been in a yoga class, a yin yoga class, with a girl that had hypermobility. We were doing our bound angle pose, and her knees could almost touch the floor. We were holding that for 5 minutes, and the teacher put sandbags on her hips and her knees. I never went back to her class after that. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, correct, exactly. I mean, if you knew what this causes, in sometimes in the short term, but also in the long term, and I think we're still yet to see, and I'm already seeing them, a lot of hip injuries, irreversible injuries, knee injuries, sacrum injuries. I'm afraid in a lot of the female populations doing these kind of practices. So if you know your anatomy, then you know, please don't put pressure on those joints. Don't sit on those joints. Don't sit there forever, overstretching those ligaments that protect your joints. So, but yeah, this is, I know that it is a little bit controversial to talk about this, but when I looked at the science behind it, there's no science. I mean, it's really, yeah. And it's very, very recent, and yeah. Anyway, but we'll talk about that another time. And I know that can be, for some people who are yin yoga teachers or practitioners, they can be like a little bit confronting. But here we talk about the basis of anatomy, and everything in moderation would be the right thing to do for us. And I want to finish off with then mentioning, Yasmin, we go back again to that, are women living longer than men? About the type of equality that we are promoting, that women are promoting, which is like, now women have started to drink as much or more alcohol than men. More younger girls are starting to smoke than boys, right? We are also, as I said, pushing every workout, whether it's in yoga or whether it's in weightlifting or whether it's in anything that is hardcore, high impact exercise, we are, matching that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And my question is this equality what we really want for our health? I mean, I don't mean to be, but as far as I'm concerned, men have already made a mess of the world. Why would I want to be equal to them, right? Why would I want to do the same as they're doing in that sense? So that is the question, right?
Yeah. Okay. So women are not smaller men. Our anatomy is different. Our physiology is different. The way we think and feel and see the world is very different from that male perspective. And I grew up when in the UK there was the ladette, so you drink as much as a man, and that didn't do me any good.
No, it's only damaging to us, isn't it? Yeah. Only damaging us. Yeah. And our tolerance and the way our liver processes alcohol and toxins is right. Okay, it's very different. And going into then those older years, into the menopause as well, definitely we're not going to be able to resolve that alcohol as well. And needless to say that it would put us in other dangers, okay, of not being conscious of what's happening around us, et cetera, et cetera. The same goes for drugs as well. And so that to start thinking as women and think of our, I don't even want to call it equality. Is almost like I'm a feminist, and is women's health. Yeah. It doesn't have to be. I love what you said, which is women are not smaller men, right? And to say I'm like a man is like, well, first of all, that's not possible, right? Yeah. Right. Okay, but yeah.
what's really interesting in my background in healthcare is nearly all the studies were done on men, white middle-aged men. There is still so much work to be done on just the basic medical conditions in women, let alone all the women's health and everything. So,
yeah,
we just need a complete
we know
change of
so
culture.
little. We know so little still. And you know what really upsets me, that when I watch any series about any strong women, they're always drinking a whiskey straight out. And I go, you're a woman, why? So I absolutely love Gillian Anderson, for example. It's a wonderful actress, and she represents a lot of women, but all the series and all the work that she does comes across as this really straight woman and really strong. When I mean straight, I mean like very rounded and solid, right? And then she sits at the bar and she goes, whiskey, and give me a scotch. And she goes, and she drinks, and I'm going, no, don't do that. It's destroying your esophagus. You're going to get stomach cancer. And your breath can smell. So why do you want to do that? What, to show that you are strong? And as a matter of fact, it's weakening us, actually making us weaker. So to watch out for that and to say, okay, I am a woman. We need to learn a lot about our anatomy, physiology, and how our body works, right? And how actually maybe our idea of these opening, stretching, not right, okay, and hanging on our joints that we have in yoga, this veganism.
And the other thing, when I think about what you see on social media with young females in these amazing poses, and I'm like, is this for the male gaze or the female gaze? What is this for? Because
It's worrisome. It's worrisome. And I don't think, I don't think it is strengthening us. It is not making us stronger. It is actually making us more vulnerable. And we really need to look at ourselves and learn about ourselves, and only science and enough years of the medical system learning about women. That's the only thing that is going to help us really, and to listen to ourselves. And to say, here's the type of equality that I want. Do I want to drink like a man? Do I want to think like a man? Do I want to act like a man? Do I want to work out like a man? Right? No, I need to become strong in my muscles, because I know that when I drop my hormones through the menopause, I'm going to need that support. I need to be vital, to move, and I need to be able to realize the planet is not trying to destroy me, but to protect me. Yes, and so with that, Yasmin, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for this wonderful conversation. In our next episode, we will talk a little bit more, also going into subjects that are related to yoga therapy, and health. Thank you, Yasmin.